Decarbonising heavy-duty trucks, I think, gives a great opportunity for the UK. We're really good at the engineering that's involved. And that can mean that it's really good for growth, for jobs, infrastructure, and for balance of payments.
To be clear, this is not a one technology solution. For us to achieve decarbonisation goals, it will require the best of every technology available.
We have already 11 battery electric trucks in serious production, and now we are heading towards also developing the hydrogen side of the technology. What is definitely necessary right now is also the support on the infrastructure side.
Now we need to work together with all the other stakeholders to deliver a complete ecosystem to make their operation a reality too. More government stimulus would really help encourage an early uptake of electric trucks.
And electric road transport is already a reality today. We see it working on a few of the major transport routes in Europe. And it will work in the UK as well.
Shifting a heavy load indeed. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us for this today, gentlemen. We've got the first end of sale deadline, just a decade away. Words to strike, I don't know, hopefully not fear into your hearts, but a challenge indeed. So let's just start by approaching that and see where you guys think you are on that journey and how realistic that deadline is. And if I can start with, I've got you listed here as the truck guys from DAF and Daimler. David, could you just give me your impressions as to where you think we are on that journey? Do you think it's realistic?
Well, first off, I think we have to do this together. So it's not where we are as a separate manufacturer, but it's where we are as an industry. The fact that you're asking the question, I think that's telling in itself. There's certainly risks of any kind of innovation, and this is a big change, a big innovation. I look at it mostly from I split it into the supply side and the demand side. I think we as the OEMs, and this echoes a lot of what has been said in the previous panel, we've invested into the platforms, into the technologies. The products are available. The products are available to order. We actually have a demo downstairs in the street in front of the building if you'd like to see a DAF XB. But the supply side is not enough by itself. We need to have that strong demand. And the strong demand requires TCO parity. It requires the infrastructure to support the utilization of those vehicles. And in fact, it should be better than the previous technologies, which is where we need to get to. I think the direction we're all headed, we're doing the right thing. We're helping the environment. I don't think there's any opposing views or non-alignment on that. But the timing and whether we're going to get there within 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years, which are the deadlines that we're looking at to various degrees, is something that we all have to work on together. And we need the government to cooperate and help both the supply side and our operators and customers as the demand side.
Are you feeling pretty confident about it?
I invite you to try one of our trucks. They're excellent vehicles to drive, the electrics, as the ICE ones as well. I believe that humanity always pulls together under a good deadline. We certainly have no shortage of good deadlines.
Very nicely put. There's so much unsaid there, isn't there? Now, Manfred from Daimler, how's that projection coming along for you guys?
Yeah, if you ask us whether we have understood the challenge, yes. Are we on the right pathway? I would say also yes. Can we solve the 10 years timeline? This is a different question. Just to give you one indication, in our factory in Wörth, where we produce roughly about, let's say, in good years, 100,000 trucks, we sell only 2 trucks, more or less, with an identical configuration. So we have many, many different configurations, and what we have right now is a standard e-Actros 600, where you can operate 500 kilometers in a tractor design. So that is solved. Yeah. So we have a good product. Do we manage with that product all variations we have? No. So we need more, and this is exactly the challenge. So our customers do not really order thousands of the same and identical type. They are ordering many, many different types. And can we manage that already today? No. So another example, our configuration right now is a 2-axle configuration. Many customers here in the UK ask for a 3-axle configuration. So that's more difficult to implement the battery technology to that. And then there are many different other topics which I would like to address later. But I think there is another situation where we definitely look into the second technology we, at least at Daimler, convey, which is the hydrogen technology. So having everything in place in 10 years, that is the question. I doubt it very much. Yeah, and even Europe, or mainland Europe, so to say, UK has a different timeline, but in mainland Europe, we have even more, and we do not target 100% reduction, or let's say an ICE ban, also whatever you may call it. Even the Commission, which is really very, very ambitious, even the Commission decided to go for a 90% target by 2040. So that is 15 years from now. So if you take everything together, we are on the right pathway. We have technologies where we believe that will be the solution. But if we can manage the 10 years, I doubt it very much.
Let's turn to that technology, Todd, if we may. As the Chief Technology Officer at PHINIA, I know that you're approaching in a variety of different ways the challenges of net zero in 10 years' time. What update can you give us from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I'll just mention, because PHINIA is a newer name, but you may know us historically as Delphi or Delphi Technologies. Frankly, I was a little surprised to be invited to be here. We have very little to do with electric vehicles. We supply fuel injection systems. Having said that, we are all in on decarbonization. And as I reflected on the goal and the direction and the objective of SMMT Electrified and our industry in general to decarbonize, I think it's important that we consider all possible avenues. Electrification certainly is here. It's available, as we've heard. It's growing. It's very real in our industry. But to the question of can we achieve our decarbonization goals in 10 or 15 years, I don't think the answer is yes, especially if we focus on just one path forward. So from a technology standpoint, there are alternative ways to move forward in decarbonizing. And it's important to recognize, I believe, that combustion is not the enemy. Carbon is what we're working on reducing. And there are viable existing technologies today that are out there that are in practice to be able to decarbonize HGVs as well as smaller class vehicles using alternative fuels like hydrogen, even ethanol, methanol. These paths forward for technology are viable. They leverage existing infrastructure. They leverage a knowledge base that's been optimized over decades and centuries and would allow us to move forward, taking a step that improves our position, even if it's not a complete answer to the future.
And how would you describe the demand for those different technologies from your perspective?
We see a very high demand, actually. We're
for one more than another? Are you finding hydrogen's getting a big vote? Or how would you describe it?
I would say in our interaction, we interact with global OEs of all vehicle classes. And in our action, we've had over 80 engagements with individual OEs for technology demonstrators, single cell engines, multiple cylinder engines, road and pilot. So there's a significant interest in hydrogen internal combustion engine technology. We also see an increasing interest in other alternative fuels, also leveraging some of the strengths and capabilities of combustion, whether it's ethanol or methanol, biofuels. These are all areas that we're experiencing interest and contact in as we collectively try to work toward decarbonization goals.
So if I'm not ignoring you, Roel, don't worry, we're going to come back to you in just one second. But if I can just ask you, Justin, as somebody who organises a heck of a lot of trucks at John Lewis, what are the solutions for you, and how do you feel that a company like yours should be approaching hitting those targets?
I think it's really important to focus on carbon reduction first and foremost.
So Todd's words were ringing true.
Absolutely, that's the important challenge, and I would argue more important than that of air quality. So I think a focus on carbon rather than zero tailpipe is very important, because there are solutions out there which might be zero tailpipe but higher carbon than alternatives, such as biomethane. So we operate a lot of trucks, about 440 trucks on biomethane gas. They save between 80 and 90% of the carbon versus diesel, and are lower carbon than running an electric vehicle on sort of grid mixed electricity. So there's some really important, I think, to accept the role of low carbon fuels in this transition to electric and the zero tailpipe. I think there's also no doubt in my mind that over time everything has to become electric. But you might have seen our company results came out this morning.
Well done.
We operate in a low margin business. So anything that we do has to reduce carbon, but also has to have favourable TCO to diesel. And we don't see a point for that in the near future. I think that there are levers that can be pulled to make that TCO work. Not all of those are being used right now, but I think that's the answer, to look at it holistically rather than simply in the journey to electrify. Very often, just replacing a diesel vehicle with an electric one doesn't work so well. You don't get the TCO benefits. If you look at it holistically, there's often other things that you can do to actually make that work and really sort of benefit from the differences in EVs or other fuels and diesel.
And just to get a bit of a picture, you mentioned you've got about 440 trucks which are running on methane or biofuels, yeah? How many are electric? Do you have many electrified ones?
We have our first electric truck demonstrator delivered on Monday, actually, which is Scania. So really important that we get experience with that. We had a kind of a shorter term demonstrator before. We're part of a project called JOLT, which is all about gathering electric trucks from different manufacturers and spreading them around different operators, so that we get experience of a lot of different vehicles and a lot of different operations, and we can gather the data in very high fidelity to be able to model that rollout of electric vehicles into multiple fleets. So absolutely important to engage with EVs right now and to understand how do you achieve that positive business case with them.
And I'm sure that in those discussions you're talking about infrastructure of charging, which brings us neatly to Milence. Congratulations on the launch of your new facility. We've heard a few mentions of it already today. So Roel, welcome. Tell us how Milence sees its role in enabling the transition, because you're just making your mark here in the UK for the first time.
Yeah, well, I think as has been said already, I think also a few times, in the end, this is not something anyone can do alone. This is part of a wider ecosystem, and if you look at the ecosystem, you can identify 4 or 5 bigger stakeholders, which is grid, which is energy, transport companies, OEMs, the shippers, the fleets, ultimately, obviously, also the infrastructure, the CPOs. And so, we see ourselves as one of those stakeholders to make this happen and to make this transition happen. Looking at Milence specifically, we have been established 2.5 years ago, and our shareholders are a few of the OEMs. And we have been established also to break the chicken and egg situation, because today, one of the reasons there's not so much public charging infrastructure being built is because of there's no demand to make a very profitable business case as of day one. And so there needs to be companies who need to take market risk, who need to believe in this transition, and we need to start building this infrastructure like we did and opened last week in Immingham, with the belief that this demand and this transition will happen. And I think that's also a part of the role we see. So the role is that we try to set market standards, not only by the design, and maybe, right, I think it's only our belief of a good design, but also in pricing, and to bring trust to the market that actually it is possible to build those hubs, and this is kind of the price point which
also the market needs well, it's not a price point which in the current ecosystem will bring you to TCO parity, but at least it will bring you a lot closer to running a decent business case on an electric fleet.
So how does that resonate with you at Daimler and at DAF, gentlemen? I mean, maybe David first, in terms of how this sort of infrastructure model works for you guys.
Yeah, so infrastructure, I think we do need to split that into a couple of elements. One is the grid, which I think I'll come back to in a moment, and then on charging, there's opportunity charging and there's depot charging. Opportunity charging, so basically the gas station equivalent of charging an electric vehicle, is something that our customers cannot do themselves. It has to be done by massive investments that allow you to have the ability to charge a vehicle when you really need it on the M1 or another location. But there's a fundamental difference with ICE or there are many fundamental differences between ICE and EV, obviously, but one is that if you plan your route right, you always know that your truck is leaving with 100% charge or enough charge to do the route. And I do believe that there are already quite a lot of use cases where the current technology with depot charging is sustainable and viable for many applications. Now that needs to grow. We need to have more people, more operators, more companies trialing, learning, optimizing, and growing that. The other one, like I said, the grid. I've spoken to a lot of our stakeholders, whether it's dealers, local fleets, everyone's curious about EV, but they don't know how to implement it, how to take the next steps. So the curiosity is there, the discussions are there, but to move from that element to measurable action, so to actually get the vehicle onto the road and have the benefit of a more sustainable ton-kilometer, there's a gap there, and a lot of times that gap is we don't know how to charge because we don't have the electricity, the grid connection that we require, and it won't be available for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And when we're talking about a waiting or lead time of multiple years, then those targets that we were talking about earlier, I mean, they're here in a blink of an eye. However, there are solutions like battery energy storage solutions. I've seen, honestly, more prevalent in some of the European markets where operators are installing the full system of whether it's solar panels, it's battery energy storage, it's the software that allows everything to work together, and the charger so that they can have electricity when they need it at the right price, where they need it.
What's Daimler's view on this, Manfred?
Well, first of all, we are partnering up with our competitors on financing Milence and other things. But I think what is really more crucial right now is trying to implement the system, and we are focusing very much right now on depot charging and supplying, let's say, the trucks, which then will be operated in depots, because in those depots you have the chance to get cheaper electricity, and you first start really to build up experiences with operating such a system. When it comes really to public charging, then I think we all agree, and everybody who is driving an e-car, he knows when he is going somewhere to the highway, he pays a significant amount on top for the electricity. And that is a key now really to get that in place. Not only that you have the infrastructure, but you have it at affordable prices. This is really a challenge, and we're talking a lot to politicians and governments really to make them aware that we need not only the infrastructure, but we need it at affordable prices in an affordable, let's say, in a supportive power configuration. It's not only that we're talking about, let's say, 150 kilowatt or 350, we are talking about also megawatt charging in order to, we saw that from this Scania presentation, in order really to keep the driver times pari with diesel trucks. So it's a multitude of requirements and challenges we have to solve in parallel. Yeah, that is something where we are very much focusing on, and as it goes, we are developing all those technologies which are necessary for that. One last topic, and David mentioned that, is really what we don't have in our hands is really the grid. Yeah, this is the most challenging, at least from my perspective. And I hope I'm not so much aware how it really goes here in UK, but in Europe we have, in addition to that, or in mainland Europe or whatever, sorry for, perhaps I have the wrong description, it's really about planning times to get those refueling stations, charging stations really being done. So you have a lot of requirements, really planning, which take, let's say, the planning times to build up those charging stations, charging hubs, really to a very long period. And that makes it really also, in addition to the existing other challenges, really a problem. Yeah, going for 2-3 years for those charging stations, it's way too long. Yeah, you have to dig in all animals to find solutions for them, and this takes it too long. Yeah.
Roel, I know you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, well, I think to clarify, right, it's not a battle between public charging and depot charging. Also, as Milence, obviously we have been established to build public charging. That's our goal. But every electric truck journey starts with depot charging, right? So also Milence, we support that. That's electrons charged by non-Milence sites, but we are fine. But I think it's very important to understand that with depot charging, the warehouse is already at a certain location, and then there needs to be grid. And then you can be lucky you're close to a substation, or you're not so lucky and you're not so close to a substation. For public charging, Milence, we don't have a legacy, so we pick the location where we can get grid. Yeah. But I think it's important to understand that it's two different challenges. I think still the cost of the grid, I'll come back to that later as well, is in UK is quite a challenge. But it's important to, I think, to understand that especially those first 1 or 5 or 10 electric trucks of a fleet, they will rely on depot charging. They will grow in confidence. They might use our sites as top-up charging. They might try longer distances because they trust the technology, but it does start with the depots.
Does this ring true for you when you're looking at the prospect of electrification of your fleet?
Yes, and certainly the three big challenges of electric trucks is the infrastructure is one. There's the total cost of ownership of the vehicle itself right now because they are more expensive, not surprisingly. And the last one is a productivity loss, both through reduced payload at the top end and also the time spent charging. So those three challenges are the ones that need to be addressed. That there are other solutions. One which, when I first saw it, I thought was crazy, and there's probably people in the room whose eyes will be rolling ceilingwards at this, but there is a concept called electrified road systems, and that's rather like a tramway, either with overhead power lines where the truck can charge as it goes along, or conductors in the road. So there are systems out there. They are very expensive, very challenging, but then the alternatives are also very expensive and very challenging. So I really believe there is a scope in the UK to do more trials on things like electrified road systems, but because it does solve some of those problems. It would require clearly a government policy to actually adopt it, which is unusual. Governments like to be agnostic, understandably, but I think there are occasions when governments have to make a decision about a technology. So, for example, at one point we decided that the grid in the UK was going to be, or the socket in the wall was going to be a certain configuration and 240 volts. If you don't do that, everyone ends up with all sorts of wild and wacky systems. So this might be one example where if this is what it takes to bring forward that date when people adopt vehicles in larger numbers because the vehicle is cheaper, it's got better payload, and better productivity, then it might be, I think we should at least be looking at that and maybe trialling it in the UK.
It's interesting because I was going to move on to what you all would like to see in terms of government support for your various different sort of aspects of this technology. And so that's your stall set out. I'm sure there may be other things as well, other incentives. I mean, Todd, perhaps I could come to you. From where you're sitting with a sort of a suite, if you like, of options for people as we head towards decarbonisation, what would be an incentive here in the UK for your company?
I think it's important to recognize that as we move forward with different technology options, there are areas where it may be more suited, and make sure we're not looking at HGV, for example, as one big market block. There are different categories and capabilities and operational needs for vehicles, whether it's over the road, which we often think about when we think of HGV, or off-road, or other considerations to make. And when we take those into account, the specific question about what can be done from a government standpoint in the UK to help move things forward, I would say specifically to acknowledge that there are multiple paths forward, and to achieve our decarbonization goals, I don't believe can be done if we focus exclusively on one technology. So H2 ICE, as I've mentioned, being recognized in the zero emission vehicle category is one area that unlocks that option for customers to take to be able to move forward and consider those things. The availability, we've talked about the grid for electrification and the cost of electricity, the availability of alternative fuels, whether it's hydrogen or others, at reasonable costs is another way that the government can help make regulation and position things to not artificially favor one technology over another, but allow the best solution for particular market segments to be selected by consumers who are making sure that their total cost of ownership is going to work in that technology selection.
And David, what would be your shout out to any policy advisors in the room today?
Well, first I would like to echo something that Todd said, in that hydrogen, especially hydrogen internal combustion, is something that's very exciting for us. It's very exciting for the industry because it's so much closer to what our operators and our dealer networks are used to working with. And that last, if you remember the slides from Frederick, that last 90%, or so the last 10% where 90% is covered by EV, that element is very likely to be able to move over to hydrogen internal combustion, but not to EV. So that would be a very big gain for the environment if it does. But with hydrogen, there's still a lot of issues, like the green hydrogen production is minimal. It's expensive to produce, otherwise it ends up using fossil fuels. And it's yet another infrastructure that needs to be built out. So while I strongly believe that there should be a choice in the market, I also want to warn of going in too many different directions, because with the deadlines looming, we should have a united front and a united strategy where all the stakeholders move together in one direction. Back to the question, what I'd like from policy today for the UK is certainly to help that demand build, the market demand be there so in a more natural way, where especially the companies that are willing to take whether it's a risk or they strategically choose to incorporate EV and other new technologies today, they have that help that it is not, well, they need the help, whether that comes in some sort of tax or other benefit to the operators. We need that. Without that, we're just not going to have the right pace to hit the deadlines that are ahead of us.
And Manfred, you've already mentioned a couple of elements of policy support that you'd welcome. Do you want to just add to that?
Yeah, let me address that a little bit globally, so to say. I think beyond all the infrastructure topics, I think in our industry it's the TCO topic, which really matters us. No truck operator is buying a truck and places it in front of his house to show his neighbor how beautiful this truck is. Yeah. If you take that into account, then it's really the situation that we have to solve the TCO topic, and this can't be done by the industry. This is really a governmental topic, and it's not very comfortable for them, to be very honest. So I give you an example. In Germany, we lobbied a lot. We argued a lot in favor of a toll system which incorporates also CO2. And you can imagine that the commercial vehicle operators were not very happy because that is increasing the price to operate the truck. And on the other side, it gives us a difference between the, let's say, the electric vehicle and the conventional vehicle. And this is favoring later on really, let's say, a positive TCO in many cases in Germany. And that's why we have a lot of, let's say, order intakes also in Germany on that. But of course, this requires this decision by politicians to go for that. And I don't want to advertise for here because it's very different and it's very expensive to implement that. But politicians have to look for the topic and to provide a solution on it. And so far we don't see that here. Yeah, electricity is quite expensive, so it's not really, let's say, working very much in the right direction because those vehicles will remain more expensive than conventional ones. And then on the other side, what do you have still in order to solve the problem of the TCO? So it's up to the politicians. I would leave that open, but I want to address this topic as a key topic. Beyond all the topics on infrastructure, the TCO topic is really key.
Roel, what would you like to see from the government?
Yeah, well, I very much have to echo the last the last storyline. In the end, we are speaking with many fleets ourselves as well. In the end, this industry is also somehow quite simple because everything is about TCO. So, and looking at TCO, and we have seen the pie chart from Frederick, there's several elements into the TCO, and today with electricity, with electric trucks, we are definitely not there yet. However, as was also mentioned, in Germany, we already have trucks, electric trucks, and customers every day at the Milence sites who are a few €1,000 per year cheaper than a diesel truck, right? So, and then the increase in demand we see, for instance, in Germany, but also in some cases in Belgium and the Netherlands, then the market creates itself.
Yeah.
Then also deadlines, and yes, 10 years is a very tough deadline, but at least it's also up to the market to make speed. So the main topic is to help the industry, and the industry is both in the end the OEMs because of the purchase price of the trucks, with battery development, battery technology development, and economies of scale. Prices will come down, have already come down, will come down, but it's also the cost of the grid, right? So just to give some insights is that to build a charging hub, a public charging hub in UK, it's 1.5 to 2 times more expensive than in mainland Europe. So land on average is twice as expensive. Grid is between 2 to 5 times as expensive. And that's the one-off investment. Also the cost of the electrons is then not, well, it's I would say on average, it's not very cheap, but also not super expensive. So in the end, I think it's important to get acceleration. And then looking at the policy side, you always have the carrot and the stick, right? So you can put a stick, every fleet needs to have 10% electric by X, and no matter whether whether the TCO is positive or not, that's legislation. Or it can be the carrot in the sense of you are actually quite close to TCO parity, we help you, and also volume will come by itself.
A round of applause. Thank you.